I, 32M, never thought I'd be writing this, but I need to get this off my chest and maybe get some advice. My wife and I have been married for 5 years, and we've always been clear about not wanting kids right now. We're both focused on our careers, and we agreed to revisit the topic in a few years. My mother-in-law, however, has other plans. It started about 3 months ago when my wife's mother began staying with us more frequently, claiming she was lonely after her divorce. At first, we didn't mind. She would cook dinner sometimes and help around the house. Looking back, I should have noticed how she always insisted on getting our groceries and medications from the pharmacy. Last week, during a family dinner at our house, my mother-in-law stood up with tears in her eyes and announced that she was finally going to be a grandmother. Everyone turned to look at us. My wife nearly choked on her wine, and I felt my stomach drop. We hadn't told anyone we were expecting, because we weren't. My wife immediately denied being pregnant, but her mother just smiled and said, "Honey, I saw the test in your bathroom trash last week. Here's where it gets worse." My wife insisted she hadn't taken any pregnancy tests, but her mother pulled one out of her purse, a positive one, claiming she had saved it as a surprise. Something felt off. My wife and I exchanged looks across the table, both knowing we hadn't been intimate recently due to our heavy workloads. The dinner devolved into chaos, with my wife's siblings congratulating us while my wife repeatedly denied everything. After everyone left, my wife was in tears, insisting something was wrong. She took another pregnancy test right then, negative. We were confused and relieved, but then she noticed something strange about her birth control pills. The color was slightly off, and when she compared them to her previous Pax photos, they were definitely different. I started digging through our bathroom trash and found empty vitamin bottle labels carefully peeled off. My blood ran cold as I pieced it together. I checked our security cameras. We'd installed them after a break-in last year. The footage showed my mother-in-law in our bathroom multiple times when she was supposedly cleaning. My wife was shaking as she watched the footage of her mother methodically replacing her pills. But what made us both sick was realizing this wasn't just about forcing a pregnancy. She had been planning this public announcement for weeks. She wanted to trap us, to manipulate not just our reproductive choices but our entire lives. We confronted her the next day. Instead of denying it, she broke down crying, saying she was only trying to help. She rambled about how we were wasting our best years and how she deserved grandchildren. When my wife asked about the fake pregnancy test, her mother admitted to buying it online, along with the vitamins that looked like birth control pills. The betrayal runs deep. My wife hasn't stopped crying, alternating between anger and devastation. Her siblings are divided. Some think their mother went too far. Others suggest we should appreciate her concern. My wife's mother keeps sending manipulative texts about how we're breaking her heart and how she only wanted what's best for the family. Now we're facing a family crisis. My wife is in therapy, dealing with the trauma of this violation. We've blocked her mother on everything, but flying monkeys keep emerging. Relatives calling to tell us we're overreacting, that she just wants grandchildren, as if that justifies this insanity. I'm writing this because I need to know if we're handling this right. We're planning to press charges for tampering with medication, but some family members are begging us to reconsider, saying it will tear the family apart. But honestly, I don't see how this family can stay together after something like this. The worst part? Some relatives are now suggesting we should just have a baby to fix everything, as if bringing a child into this toxic situation would solve anything. My wife is barely sleeping, jumping every time her phone rings. Our home, which used to feel safe, now feels violated. We're changing locks and installing more cameras, but the damage to our trust is done. I keep thinking about what could have happened if we hadn't figured it out. What if my wife had gotten pregnant? What other boundaries would her mother have crossed with our child? The more I think about it, the angrier I get. But I need outside perspectives. Are we overreacting by pursuing legal action? How do we handle the family members who keep defending her? And most importantly, how do we move forward from this? Update. Things have escalated in ways I never expected. After my last post, we went ahead and filed a police report. The officer who took our statement seemed skeptical at first, but when we showed him the security footage and the tampered medication, his whole demeanor changed. Turns out tampering with prescription medication is a serious offense, and the premeditated nature of it made it worse. The fallout has been intense. Word got out about the police report, and my wife's mother had a complete meltdown. She showed up at our door at 3 a.m., screaming about how we were destroying her life. We didn't open the door, just called the police. They took her in for trespassing, and now she's facing additional charges. My wife's oldest sister, who initially defended their mother, finally saw the security footage yesterday. She broke down crying and confessed something that made everything so much darker. Apparently, their mother had done something similar to her years ago, but with prenatal vitamins. She'd been secretly replacing her regular vitamins with prenatal ones, convinced that preparing her body would make her more likely to have children. My sister-in-law had brushed it off at the time, but seeing this pattern of behavior brought up all those buried feelings. The investigation revealed more disturbing details. The police found receipts in my mother-in-law's house for multiple types of fertility supplements and ovulation tests. She had a whole calendar marked with my wife's suspected cycle dates and detailed notes about our daily routines. There were even pamphlets about grandparents' rights lawyers. This wasn't just about getting a grandchild. She was planning for a long-term takeover of our lives. My wife's therapy sessions have uncovered years of manipulation we'd both overlooked. The constant jokes about biological clocks, the passive-aggressive comments about our careers, the way she'd undermine our decisions, it was all part of a pattern. The therapist suggested we might need to consider a restraining order, especially given the escalating behavior. The family is completely fractured now. One of my wife's brothers hasn't spoken to us since the police got involved, insisting we're criminalizing motherly love. But her younger sister, who's child-free by choice, revealed that their mother had been pressuring her too, even trying to set her up with more family-oriented men behind her partner's back. The most surreal moment came yesterday when we received a letter from my mother-in-law's church group. They're trying to mediate the situation, suggesting family counseling and asking us to forgive and move forward in Christ's love. They even had the audacity to include a pamphlet about the spiritual importance of motherhood. We threw it straight in the trash. My wife's been incredibly strong through all this, but last night she broke down after finding an old photo album. It was full of pictures from her childhood, and she couldn't stop questioning everything. Was any of it real? She asked me. Was she always just seeing me as a future incubator? I held her as she cried, feeling completely helpless. The legal process is moving forward, but it's taking a toll on everyone. Our lawyer says we have a solid case, especially with the video evidence and the detailed planning we uncovered. But each new development feels like reopening a wound. The prosecutor is pushing for serious charges, saying this case could set an important precedent about reproductive coercion. Some family members have started sharing stories about other controlling behaviors they'd witnessed over the years but had dismissed. It's like once the dam broke, everything started pouring out. One cousin mentioned how my mother-in-law had tried to convince her to accidentally get pregnant to keep her boyfriend from taking a job in another state. Another recalled her sabotaging a relative's contraception years ago, but everyone had written it off as a misunderstanding. The hardest part is watching my wife struggle with the guilt. Even though she knows she's not responsible for her mother's actions, she keeps wondering if she somehow enabled this behavior by always trying to maintain peace. Her therapist says this is common in children of manipulative parents, but knowing that doesn't make it easier. We've had to change our whole lives. New phone numbers, additional security systems, cameras everywhere. We even moved our important documents to a safety deposit box after learning that my mother-in-law had once tried to access my wife's medical records by impersonating her at the doctor's office. Final update. It's been 3 months since everything blew up, and I finally feel ready to share how this all ended. The court date was last week, and honestly, it went both better and worse than we expected. My mother-in-law took a plea deal. The prosecutor had built a solid case, and her lawyer advised her it was the best option. She's been sentenced to 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and she's not allowed within 500 feet of us. The judge was particularly harsh in his comments, saying her actions were a calculated attack on fundamental human rights. The real shock came during the victim impact statements. My wife stood up to speak, and her mother completely lost it in the courtroom. She started screaming about how ungrateful we were, how she sacrificed everything for her children, and how we were denying her God-given right to be a grandmother. It was like watching someone's mask completely slip off. The bailiff had to remove her, and several family members who'd been on the fence about supporting us finally saw her true colors. What we didn't expect was the aftermath. The case made local news, and suddenly my wife's inbox was flooded with messages from other women sharing similar stories about family members trying to control their reproductive choices. It was horrifying to realize how common this is, but it also helped my wife feel less alone. She's even started a support group for survivors of reproductive coercion. The family situation has somewhat stabilized, but in unexpected ways. My wife's brother, who hadn't spoken to us since the police report, finally reached out last week. His wife is pregnant, and he's terrified about our mother-in-law's potential involvement in their child's life. They're moving to another state and asked us for advice about security cameras and legal protection. My wife's therapy has been going well, but we've both realized this incident exposed deeper issues in our family dynamic. We've started setting firm boundaries with everyone, not just her mother. It's amazing how many normal family behaviors we now recognize as manipulative. Several relatives stopped speaking to us when we refused to attend family events where her mother would be present, but we're learning that's okay. The most unexpected development came from my wife's younger cousins. They've started coming to her for advice about standing up to family pressure. It turns out our situation gave them courage to speak up about their own experiences. One of them even left an emotionally abusive relationship after recognizing similar controlling patterns. We've moved to a new house, something we weren't planning to do, but the old place held too many bad memories. Our new home has a state-of-the-art security system, and more importantly, it feels like ours. My wife has started sleeping through the night again, and she's back at work, though she admits some days are harder than others. The hardest part has been accepting that there's no real closure. Her mother still sends messages through different people, alternating between apologies and guilt trips. Each time, it gets a little easier to ignore them, but it still hurts. The therapist says that's normal. We're mourning the relationship we thought we had, not just dealing with the betrayal. Last week, we found an old photo album my wife had forgotten to pack during the move. Instead of triggering a breakdown like before, she was able to look through it and talk about the good memories while acknowledging the manipulation that had always been there. It felt like progress. We've decided to stay firm on our decision about children. We'll have them when and if we choose, not because of anyone else's expectations. The whole experience has actually made our marriage stronger. We communicate better now, and we're both more aware of the importance of protecting each other's boundaries. The support group my wife started has grown. They meet twice a month, and it's powerful seeing people realize they're not alone in these experiences. Some of them are dealing with situations even more complex than ours. It's helped put things in perspective and given us a sense of purpose in all this chaos. Looking back at my first post, I can hardly believe how much has changed. We're different people now, stronger, more cautious maybe, but also more sure of ourselves and our choices. The family we have left is smaller, but it's real. The relationships that survived are healthier because they're based on respect, not obligation. As for my mother-in-law, we heard she's finally started counseling. Whether it helps or not isn't our concern anymore. We've learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, even from family. Especially from family who think love gives them the right to control you. If there's one thing I want people to take from our story, it's this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And no amount of family pressure or tradition or guilt is worth sacrificing your autonomy for. We lost a mother, but we gained our freedom. In the end, that was worth all the pain. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.